Welcome of another great video. Perhaps a family member passed away. Now you're the executor. What do you do? What is the first step you have to take? Or maybe you're making a will and you want to know what the role of the executor entails to make sure you pick the right person. Well, we can help out today. We're going to go through some of the common duties here, Kevin, go through a checklist of what the executor has to tackle. And why don't we just start at the beginning? Someone passes away, you're the executor. First steps, Kevin, you got to gather the information.
Yeah, I mean, the executor checklist is actually a fairly long and substantial piece of the puzzle that you have to deal with. And we're going to do this on more of a high level basis as opposed to going to every little bit.
Yeah.
But that is the first step that we have to deal with, is gathering info. So, I mean, one of the most important things, if they have a will, you've got to locate it. And then once you've located that, you identify and confirm who the actual executor is. I mean, these are two of the basics that you have to get. So that's the big start on this process. I mean, it'll involve things about, rerouting the mail because all of a sudden they're not there. It's going to go to someplace else. Whether or not you're looking at funeral arrangements, you may have to do that as well. Organization with getting that funeral director statement so that you can provide it to banks and things along those lines. But yeah, as we say, the first step is gathering the main information of everything that the person that passed away actually had. So that's one of the main things going on. And as we said, notifying the financial institutions is a large part of this, isn't it, Clint?
Yeah, so there are lots of details here. And like you mentioned, this is high levels. Would be like common duties an executor might do. It's not an exhaustive list. Doesn't mean everyone has to do exactly all these steps in this order, but it certainly gives you a good idea. And this stage, those first step stage, you're not distributing assets. You're really just getting information. So you got those death certificates. You helped with the funeral arrangements. You located the important documents. You want to notify all the financial institutions. So if they dealt with a bank, with a credit union, an investment firm, whatever it is, you want to notify those folks, those institutions. They might have their own forms. In fact, they probably will. And how to handle this situation, you probably won't tackle those forms at this stage, but you notify them, and then they might request some info. And then a later stage, you can go tackle that. A tip here, Kevin, if someone's making their own will, to ease the process, is you could kind of have all the important documents in one area and then tell your executor about that, so that they don't have to go chase down all these different documents. They know where the insurance policies are. They know where the will is. If you have a business, they know where all the important business documents are. If you have that handy and then you tell the executor where it's located, it could really fast forward this step and ease the burden on the executor. So that's the first steps here. We're getting the information. We're going through that checklist. Then we got to get an inventory, Kevin, of all the assets and liabilities.
Yeah, that's the next step. After you've gathered the information, then you got to figure out what they actually have. And again, this is not, if anybody thinks that, the process of an executor could last a week and everything's done, rarely will that be. This could be anywhere from weeks to months to get this whole scenario done. So remember that this is there is a time frame that you want to deal with all this on. And exactly, the asset gathering could be a large part. You need to begin. Where are the claims for the life insurance? Where are the bank accounts? Did you contact, if they have a pension, you got to contact the employer about where does the pension go now if there's anything. If they're retired, CPP, OAS, things along those lines, contacting the actual beneficiaries to let them know what's going on. And again, sort of these things are all part of the assets and liabilities. The same sort of scenario on the other side. If they have loans or anything along those lines, investigate who they have to pay. What credit card companies do they have to contact? Do they have to cancel the cards now? Is there an outstanding balance? Things along those lines. So figuring out exactly what they have for an asset and what they have for a liability, that is next after you've gathered the main information from the will scenario, putting it forward, because until you get all this information, there's nothing you do. And again, as you mentioned, we're not giving anything out yet. We're just figuring out where everything is and what we have.
Yeah, you're not distributing any assets at this stage. You're still in the information gathering. You did the first step of getting all the important documents, getting the basic info, notifying the institutions. Now you're getting an idea of all the assets and liabilities before you do any of the distribution. If you do the distribution too soon, that could actually be a big problem. So you got to make sure you follow the broad steps. One that we added to the list here, cancel and memorialize social media accounts. We didn't have to do that in the past, but it could be more of an issue if someone has a large online presence. They're with multiple social media platforms. Well, as an executor, you might have the responsibility of dealing with that online presence. That might mean canceling the accounts. That might mean turning it into an online memorial for that individual. Maybe they have something specific in their will they want you to do with those accounts, but you have to be aware of what accounts they have, like what is their online presence, and then you have to be able to access it, because sometimes the social media provider might not just let you log in and change the account. It could be a process. So something to add to the list. It's not necessarily an asset or a liability, but certainly part of the overall checklist there. And at this stage, you're probably going to be dealing with taxes, Kevin. You're probably going to have to start the final tax return. And in most cases, an executor might not act alone if they're dealing specifically with tax, for example. Perhaps there'll be an accountant they can contact to help out to get the prior year tax returns, to help with the final tax return that has to be prepared. And a tip, if you're preparing your will, Kevin, well, you probably have a number of professionals you work with. You've already got accountants, lawyers, and planners, all those folks. Well, if you're going to get all the documents in order, well, probably list those professionals as well to make it a little easier on your executor, right? If you deal with a certain accountant, well, that executor can contact the accountant. The accountant will already know your situation, know your past tax returns, might make it a little easier to get the final tax return done. So that would be one tip for those preparing the documents. But next stage, we got to talk probate.
Yeah, I mean, probate is something that's necessary, that has to be done for certain things. I mean, if it was just registered products you have and there's a beneficiary named on everything, that makes it simple. But a lot of people, they'll have a home. They may have a cottage property. They may have non-registered investments or things along those lines. Try getting any of these things done without probating the will is going to be really hard, if not impossible. So the executor needs to go through the entire probate document scenario. And that usually involves the assistance of a lawyer. It can. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to. You can get it all done from the provincial government and things along those lines. And then you'll have to pay the appropriate provincial taxes depending on what province you live in. But making sure that you get probate done on the will is sort of validating everything. And as we said, selling property, non-registered savings accounts, it is required to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to do it otherwise. And my assumption would be that a lot of these scenarios are going to be applicable to what happens once you've got that will in place and something happens and it's not all joint activity or things along those lines.
Exactly. I know probate, we've done videos on probate. I know often people worry about probate fees and ways to avoid probate fees, but in certain cases, you can't, right? If there's lots of real estate property, well, you're probably going to need a probated will. And what the process of probate does is you're going through the provincial court system, essentially, and then they're going to validate and say, yes, this is the valid, appropriate will. There's not another copy somewhere. This is the one you can take, follow the instructions of. So when you give that to a financial institution, well, they can bank on that. If you give it to a realtor, they can know, I can sell this property and don't have to worry about a different document that surfaces. Now I'm liable. So that validation process, that probate process, often is required when dealing with large non-registered accounts, when dealing with properties. So it's going to be tough to avoid in all cases. So on an executor, you have to be aware of that. And then there could be cost, right? Provinces, some provinces have no probate. Most of them have some form of probate. It's a fee, it's a charge, it's a tax, whatever word you want to use, but it's one way they generate revenue. So as an executor, part of responsibility would be paying those probate charges for the estate. We still have more to go here, but estate planning, lots of questions on estate planning. Where do folks go, Kevin?
They should go to chatwithclintonandkevin.com. As you've seen so far in what we put to the video, there's lots of lines that we've looked at as to what goes on as being an executor, what you need in your will for your executor to take a look at. It may not involve all of these pieces, or it may involve more than these pieces, but it is definitely something you should look at. And again, chatwithclintonandkevin.com for this or any matters in regard to your financial planning scenario. We're more than happy to answer those questions and help you out with this process moving along.
Perfect. So we finished the probate. We're on the last step here. Now you're actually distributing the assets. This is when the beneficiaries love you because you're actually handing things out. Do you want to go through these, Kevin?
Sure. Now, the administration and distribution, that's when, okay, we've already gone through it. We gathered all the information. We know where the assets and liabilities are. We've probated the bill. Now we can start by distributing these estate assets and the administration of it. So this may be initiating the sale if it is a home or a cottage we're looking at, the arrangement for adoption of pets, canceling the newspaper, getting rid of some of those credit cards or things, making sure the accounts are all set, and settling legitimate claims for the assets. I mean, it's a whole process of now we want to make sure that the beneficiaries inside the will are going to be getting what they've been designated for as the will pertains to them. So, I mean, again, lots of steps that still involve once you got to get this executor scenario. So maybe they're in an apartment or something. Now you have to cancel that lease. I mean, that's something that you have to take a look at. So we're now at that point. Everything's been done before. Now you can start the distribution process. And again, it may be as simple as, a couple days to get it all, or it may take weeks or even months to get this whole thing settled, so that they have the estate as the will stated.
Yeah, and some best practices here. One, lots of communication. You want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So executor communicating with the beneficiary is certainly encouraged. Also, if you're an executor, paper trail, get receipts. So you can do that. So if you have a distribution of an asset, you can get a receipt. They sign off on it. Now you've got a clear paper trail of what was given to who and when. And that way, if there's ever a claim or someone contests it later on, well, you got something to fall back on. You actually have a paper trail. You've got receipts for all the distributions. So some of the tips there, that is not an exhaustive list. Treat that as kind of some of the common duties. There certainly could be far more depending on the estate, or maybe a very simple estate and there's a little less, but that gives you a broad idea of what's involved for executors. We've done other estate planning videos. Specifically, we did one just on estate and taxation. So if you like this one, you're probably going to love that video. It's likely floating on the screen right now. I'm going to guess probably over Kevin somewhere over there. But you can click on that one, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Take care.